Hi, what you're about to see is an interview with a vendor in the space in and around data mesh. We'd like to thank Nick Heudecker for graciously doing these interviews with vendors. We'd also like to make it clear that the data mesh community and data mesh learning doesn't necessarily endorse anything that these vendors are talking about, but that we wanted to give them a voice to talk about what they may offer in the space, so people are aware of vendors, because obviously if everybody has to build everything themselves, the data mesh is going to be pretty hard. So with that, we really thank Nick for doing this great work, and we hope that this is good and useful to you.
Hey everybody, welcome to Data Mesh Learning. These are the vendor sessions. My name is Nick Heudecker. I am the Senior Director of Market Strategy at Cribl. If you want to find out more about Cribl, you can click on either of these two links. Hopefully Scott will put them in the description up on YouTube. And today I'm joined by Maarten from Soda. Maarten, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello everyone, I'm Maarten, co-founder and CEO of Soda. We're a company in the data management space. So super happy to be here today. At Soda, we're focusing very much on data observability and data reliability. We're based across the globe, but predominantly in Europe and in the US. And super excited to be here today. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to talking more about the data mesh.
Excellent. No, thanks for spending the time. I'm looking at your background. You said you're in Lisbon today, and I'm incredibly jealous of that. What takes you to Lisbon? Are you based there, or are you doing a company offsite?
No, I'm based in Brussels, but indeed, I think in between now and Monday, the entire company, everyone flies over here. We have our company offsite, which we do every 6 months here for Monday to Wednesday. So super excited to meet everyone again, and yeah, to spend a lot of time together, working on strategy, preparing for the quarter ahead. So yeah, very much looking forward to that.
That's a great ad for hiring. So if you want to go to Lisbon, go work at Soda, and you get to go there every 6 months, or you get to go somewhere fun in Europe every 6 months. So when was the company founded, and do you have any co-founders, or was this your idea?
Yeah, so we're founded late 2018, so early 19 we really got going. Co-founder is Tom Byens. He he's spent most of his career in kind of the open source software world. We didn't know each other before we started the company, but there were some connections, some kind of background links, because his software was used in my previous company very extensively. So I was aware of him and of the project. And that's where it started. My background personally, I was before that at a company called Cribl, which is more in the kind of data governance and data management space. They started way earlier as really one of the first to start advocating governance. And of course, data mesh talks about governance extensively as well. So more than 10 years of background in that data management space. Also did quite some implementations and of kind of data governance in organizations, typically a bit larger organizations. So have seen some of that evolution, and it's also where ultimately the idea, or where we really saw the pain as well, that companies were struggling really with creating high quality, reliable data products. There were a lot of things going wrong, of course, and a lot of changes happening, a lot of new, for example, personas and roles in the data space. Technology landscape was entirely changing. So we thought it was a very good point in time to build the next generation, or start building towards the next generation of tooling and platform in reliability and quality, really.
So then where does Soda fit in this story? Like when I think of Cribl, I think of them primarily as like a data cataloging company, and that's clearly not all they do. But I spent some time looking at your website. We talked on a prep call. Soda looks like it's primarily in the data quality space, but you also mentioned data observability, which is interesting for me because Cribl's in the observability data space, so very different, even though it's just two words swapped. Where does Soda fit in both data management and data mesh?
Right. So if we start with data management, and there's quite some capabilities that companies today are looking for to add to their stack. I think we've all already, to a large extent, moved to more of the cloud way of doing storage and compute. So we're fully aware, maybe already fully on board with a modern kind of cloud native data warehouse. And then we've likely already, as part of that, invested in new data ingestion and data transformation tooling. But then after that, when we start kind of putting these data products that we're building in production, start using them on a day-to-day operational basis, where we've predominantly focused on is helping companies instrument, so collect information, metadata about the health of their data sets, as well as test and validate data, as well as do incident management and also incident analysis. So if we have a problem, where did it originate? What was kind of the root cause? That's really where we fit. And then I think what comes typically after us, but also as adjacent category in data management, will be more of data access management. I think there's an increased interest in organizations as well. Data privacy is, of course, a concern globally, increasingly in the US as well at state level, where kind of new regulations are popping up left and right. So we fit somewhere in that stack next to data discovery and data access management and security, I would say. And then how that applies to data mesh, I think in many, many different forms. If you look at the 4 pillars of data mesh, on the one hand, when it comes to the self-serve data platform, I think there it fits in because organizations, especially central data teams, want to make it easy for the different domain teams, the people that are building data products. They want to make it easy to do the right thing. So for example, they want to make it easy to test and validate data. So in a very self-serve way. So it fits very nicely in that as a capability as part of the self-serve data platform. It also fits very well into a federated computational governance, in which we again want to make governance, which is very often a very fluffy kind of term and nobody really knows what to do. We want to make that something we can build in, that we can very easily kind of adopt and add to our data products. And there, the concept of, for example, usage agreements or data sharing agreements is something that we help or we support as well with Soda. So make it very easy for producers and consumers to align on what good data really looks like. I think those are 2 very clear spots within data mesh, or the 2 pillars that we closely kind of align to and that we help organizations with.
Those are both really compelling spaces to be in right now, especially when when I read about federated computational governance, it might as well just be called magic. Like, it's really difficult to kind of understand, like, well, what does that even mean? Like, it's a lot of syllables. Right. It's tough to unpack.
Yes.
So you want to fit into that pillar as well as the other that you mentioned, but how does it do it, right? Like yep. There's one thing to. Bluntly, I've had a lot of vendors on these interviews, and some of them will say, well, we're basically a data quality tool, or we're basically this, or basically that. But effectively what they're saying is, we're kind of repackaging a little bit, but we look just like what came before, but we're talking about data mesh in that context. So what's special about Soda in that regard? And how does it do these things?
Yes. Let's go very specific. I always like it when we kind of dive in and unpack. So one of the things, the complications of adopting a data mesh is you're working in a very distributed way, right? So you have teams depend on other teams to deliver data products and services. So, and you use them on an operational day-to-day basis. They become even part of your company's value proposition. So it must be done right. And every issue has a kind of a material risk associated with it, or has a monetary kind of value associated with it. So where we focus on as a company is we focus on the handover points, because very often when we have problems in data, it happens at handover points. If you think about as a data engineering team, for example, you're ingesting from a wide variety of data vendors or suppliers. It could be Bloomberg. It could be something in your industry. You buy a data set, for example, and you use it. But that supplier can change the structure of data one day to the other. So how do you know about that? How can you manage that handover point to make sure that downstream no problems happen? And specifically there, we have a concept called agreements that you can write in SODA-CL, SODA checks language. It allows you to say, hey, when we arrive data, and that we expect that to happen every morning at 9 a.m., by then we need it, because then we're going to trigger all our downstream maybe data transformations. We need to have completeness across these. These columns or variables need to be in certain formats. They need to have industry standard values. And if everything's wrong with that, let me know. Let the person that's responsible for that job, for example, know, so that we can take the necessary action, inform the downstream users of that, etc. And the same thing happens before consumption. There is a data product on the data mesh. Let's say it is owned by a certain group within or domain within our organization. For simplicity, let's call it the sales team. And we, for example, as finance or as marketing, we want to use some of that data. And as we kind of have these new requirements on data, we might, for example, expect higher frequency of delivery of that data sets. We want to maybe expect more complete records or more accurate records to be delivered so that we can build our data product. Also there we have a handover point, a agreement between collaboration really between producer and consumer. And again, on that handover point, we help these teams really express what they need of each other, how they can depend and build on top of each other. And that is something in traditional data quality that was not really there. We were mostly talking about rules-based checking of data. Of course, that has its place, but it didn't support this workflow. It didn't support this collaboration and alignment, which especially in a data mesh is extremely important to achieve. I hope that helps a little bit.
No, I thought that was a really good explanation. One of the challenges is always like, who actually uses this? So you mentioned sales and finance, right?
Yes.
Is it going to be, you know, I don't know, your sales enablement people that are building these checks? Is it going to be a data engineer's job to do that work on both sides, both on the delivery as well as the, let's say, the production side?
So at the ingest layer, typically that's the engineering team, data engineers. But more downstream within the domains, there it's typically what we would call the data owner, which could be an engineer, but could also be less technical person, more of an analyst, for example, that knows the business process very well, that creates this data. And it's typically those people that have the subject matter expertise that can actually tell you what good data looks like. And granted, you can use some smart techniques like looking at data historically and see what the baseline is and then alerts. And that of course helps them on their way. But more specifically within those teams, you would see that being data owners, but in reality, those are analysts very often, individuals really in the business. They might know SQL, they might be able to read SQL. Not all of them will be able to write SQL very easily, but still. So those are the ones really that we want to enable. Data product manager is increasingly also a role that we see. It kind of formalizes that responsibility as well. And traditionally in data governance, this was actually called the data steward. And that is a bit more of a legacy term, I think, increasingly. However, there was those were the people responsible to make sure that data is fully accurate and reliable and of high quality.
For the people that are responsible for building out these checks, if they're using SODA, what's their learning curve look like? How do you bring them up to speed on the platform? Are they resistant to it? Are they accepting of it? What does that kind of adoption life cycle look like?
It is one of the most important things we feel. The ability to bring somebody on board and make sure they have value within a matter of an hour, maybe even 2 hours. So it's really, really, really important. And on the one hand, your initial thinking could be, well, let's just do SQL, right? To do checks. But SQL is kind of way too generic. And there's a lot of common patterns really in what we would check. Like we, for example, would check missing or uniqueness or validity or referential integrity, or there's a whole bunch of characteristics ultimately that we want to check. So what we've done is we've created a very easy to adopt DSL, a domain specific language, It's called Soda Checks language. You can kind of think of it as LookML. It was similar in concept. The language will ultimately take care of translating that to whatever language ultimately the data source speaks, whether that's SQL or Spark and a certain dialects or not. So it will make full abstraction of that and will allow the user that writes the checks to really focus on the contents of it, right, and on the logic that they want to embed. So that process, we do that through suggestions as well, so that the user would look at the data and to say, maybe you're interested in adding this, 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 and that based on the structure of the data we see. And then to add additional ones, it's simply just some configurations in the end. They can test it out and they can put that check, deploy that in a production setting. That's typically how we go about it. So the learning curve is and should be extremely minimal.
I know that makes sense. You talk about a lot of different roles and personas within companies that would use Soda. Who do you see as the economic buyer? Like, is it a chief data officer? Is it a business unit lead? Who are you targeting when you're doing your go-to-market efforts?
In the end, I think this is a concern of the central data team, the team that creates the self-serve data platform. Typically, they report into a chief data officer, typically, especially in or head of data, or a CTO in smaller companies. That's very often where that lives. And then sometimes it's also fully departmental, like, for example, VP analytics in a marketing function. And there it is not really with the thought of, hey, this is a company-wide capability that we're making available to everyone. It is more of, we have our own needs and we want to apply this, use this product to improve our way of working. But in short, I think head of data, larger organizations, as soon as you have one, it's typically their concern to bring something like this in for the entire organization, and then sometimes departmental. Yeah.
Were there any customer stories you can share? Common patterns for deployment, quick wins, data sources that you might see often, things like that you can share?
There's, I think, a great presentation from HelloFresh. They've done a couple of presentations on data mesh. They're a big Soda customer as well. So they really use it to check all different parts of their the data that goes into data products, to validate that, to align with cross-functionally with the stakeholders involved on the expectations. So they are a good example. In general, with these types of initiatives, my experience over many years, and whether it's in governance or observability or discovery or access management, across data management really, is to start with a business use case where you go end to end with a relatively small team to prove that out, and then from there on document your learnings and then share them with the rest of the team, and then go from one use case to the other, enable, and that's typically the central data team that does that. They enable others to become successful. So that has always been an approach that I think is very helpful, because you can deliver business value early. I think a common pitfall in general is starting too broad and then not really having any tangible things to share with the rest of the organization.
Yeah, starting too broadly on a data project is a fatal flaw, I think, for a lot of companies. Like, they have champagne tastes but beer budget, or let's say their data management maturity is nowhere near where it needs to be for these big, overarching projects. I saw this a lot with enterprise data lakes and things like that.
Yep.
One of the things you and I were talking about when we did a prep call, and surprise to everybody who's listening, yeah, we do a prep call beforehand. We talked about, like, how do you get people to contribute to a data mesh? Because like in a lot of companies, people identify with the data under their control. And so it's like, you know what, my whole job is that Excel spreadsheet. My whole job is that Google Doc. And like, you'll get it out of my cold, dead hands. So how do you think people need to start getting a broader array of participants contributing to a data mesh?
I think there's two things there. Today, I think problem number one is very likely that it's not super clear what and how to do it. So the roles and responsibilities, who does what really? What are you responsible in the data mesh? What are you exactly responsible for, and how do you do it? I think that's very often a key kind of blocking factor or barrier for participation. I think secondly, a lot of the work that we do in the context of a data mesh to make a data mesh successful happens behind the scenes. So we don't have enough visibility around it. I think that example where we have two parts of the organization rely on each other. If there's a problem with the data, we will ask another part of the business or the organization to go and fix it for you because it's their data, right? But how do we incentivize them to do this for you? And how can we also create organizational awareness that this is happening? And this is not an entirely kind of new problem in organizations. We've traditionally with service organizations, we have kind of counted credits almost, right? You do something for us, and there's an between two parts of the organization, there's some form of crediting system or some form of way of accrediting somebody else for the work that they do. And I think we need very likely similar concepts to make this work.
Like almost like gamifying the data mesh in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
that'd be interesting. You know, the topic of incentives comes up a lot, and I think coming up with a different way to incentivize people to participate in data mesh environments is something we're all going to have to deal with at some point. I like the gamification idea of, you know, internal credits. Maybe you can use them at a company store or something like that, or people get called out. One thing I've often talked about is the need for data teams to do internal marketing with their organizations of like, here's new capabilities that we've built. Here's new reports that we've used for strategic wins and so on. But you really have to brag about your wins. And then that kind of creates a flywheel that keeps going, and you can get more and more wins from it.
I fully agree. I don't think we do that necessarily enough. It's where's the feed, for example, that tells you which new data products have been created, what if, for example, has become available, some key issues that we've maybe tackled before others could see it or before it created an impact. These are success stories that we should communicate. And a lot of leaders as well, not solely even in data, but just business leaders, they are really hungry for those examples, and they invest a lot of money in data in the end. And then bringing out those examples, those wins of, hey, we've done the right thing here, and we've prevented X, or we've created benefit Y, I think is very, very important to do.
Yeah, I think, you know, like pipeline stability and things like that are all things that people should be looking at as, you know what, something didn't happen and that was a win. And we should be celebrating that. It's almost like the classic cybersecurity story. It's like, well, what's the ROI of something not happening, right? It's really difficult to quantify that. No, this has been super helpful. So if folks want to find out more about Soda, where can they find it? Is it in the cloud? Is it an on-prem story? Give me the details there on availability.
Sure. So we're an open core company on the one hand. So we have a fully open source core part of our application. It's available on GitHub. We've got loads and loads of companies using that. It's a super simple way to get started, to check data, validate it, test it. So definitely, if you're an engineer or a bit more tech savvy, go and take a look there. There's also Soda Cloud. This is our commercial offering. This is more for data teams. This is more for the workflows between data teams. For example, that agreements workflow that we were talking about, and that's part of Soda Cloud. So this is these are the two areas on the product sides. So one is GitHub. We have a Slack community. You can sign up for Cloud and get started either with a free developer account or a trial of the entire platform. And then other than that, there's also our podcast. We just started the second season. We had loads of great guests last season, including Zamak on our podcast. So feel free to take a look there. It's available on all the major platforms in the end. So those would be the core areas. And yeah, we can start a discussion anywhere. We can start a discussion on the Slack as well. Feel free to reach out. We're happy to help.
And send me all those links, and we'll get them in the show notes. We'll put them on, post the stuff all up on YouTube so people can easily get to them. So there you go, Maarten. Thank you very much for your time. And once again, I'm incredibly jealous of your view. I hope you and the Soda team have a great time in Portugal.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thanks for having me as well.
Thanks a lot. Bye.